Let me be honest first. I'm someone who has way too many plans. Sometimes I even get tired just from thinking about them all. But for some reason, out of all those countless plans, the ones that actually get executed can be counted on one hand. And the most frustrating part, I know I'm capable of starting, yet I still don't start.
When I really think about it, I often feel like a very busy person, except the busyness is happening entirely inside my own head. Here's a perfect example. For months, I kept thinking about starting a YouTube channel. I researched niches, changed niches, watched other people share their income screenshots, saved how to start a channel videos in my watch later. And the result? 2 months passed. No channel, no videos. Just dozens of open YouTube tabs, piles of scattered notes with ideas, and this quiet growing feeling of, how did I end up like this again? The funny and painful part is, I can't even call this laziness, because I was thinking, constantly, analyzing, planning, researching. I genuinely felt like I was preparing properly. But the longer this went on, the clearer it became. Sometimes preparation is just a sophisticated-looking excuse we tell ourselves to delay the one thing we're actually scared to begin. From the outside, I probably looked careful and thoughtful. From the inside, I was starting to get really tired of myself. In the past, I genuinely believed that my core problem was a lack of discipline. I told myself I was probably not strict enough with myself, not driven enough, not motivated enough. So I tried to fix it by adding more of those things. I forced myself to create rigid schedules. I pressured myself to be consistent no matter what. I would even scold myself internally. Come on, how can you not even manage something this basic? Strangely, instead of making progress, my mind only grew heavier and more exhausted. There were also times when I thought the issue was intelligence or knowledge. Maybe I simply wasn't smart enough. Maybe I didn't know enough. So I watched more tutorials, read more articles, searched for yet another perspective. Yet, if I am completely honest, I already possess sufficient knowledge to simply begin. And that was when the realization finally arrived. I had been accusing the wrong culprit all along. The problem was never that I couldn't do it. It was never that I didn't understand. The real issue was this. Every time I stood on the edge of starting, I had an overwhelming desire to appear correct from the very first step. I wanted my initial move to be clean and polished. I wanted the direction to already feel certain and safe before I even took it. Unconsciously, that intense need to start the right way had become the single strongest reason preventing me from starting at all. After I became honest about all of this, I began asking myself a more fundamental question. Why exactly am I so afraid to simply begin? And the answer that emerged was not about the plans themselves. It was about the way my own mind operates. I am the type of person who, when undertaking anything, wants it to appear logical and well-considered. I want it to feel mature and deliberate. I become deeply uncomfortable with the idea of looking like I am merely experimenting or fumbling. The difficulty lies in this truth. Almost every meaningful endeavor begins with experimentation. It starts messy, uncertain, and exploratory. Yet somehow in my head, I refuse to grant myself permission for that phase. I feel that once I start something, it signifies a choice. And once I choose, I am closing the door on other possibilities. That weight feels enormous. I have come to understand that I'm not afraid of the work itself. I'm not afraid of becoming tired or exerting effort. What I truly fear is something more intimate. The fear of making a mistake in my identity. I dread walking in one direction for several months, only to realize this is not who I am. And I must confess I have an intense aversion to the feeling of having to start over from zero. So, unconsciously, I keep every possibility open. I think through every option, I weigh every potential path. The consequence is painfully simple. I never fully commit to any single path. There is one additional realization that came to me more recently. I have been tying my sense of self-worth far too closely to visible outcomes. In my mind, starting something is not merely a process, it becomes a form of proof. If I begin, then someday others will be able to judge the result. They will be able to declare it a success or a failure. Honestly, that possibility alone creates tension even before anything has happened. This is why I feel safest in the thinking phase, in the planning stage, because there I can still tell myself, I am actually capable, I just haven't started yet. There is a false sense of security in that space. Security because I have not yet been tested. Security because I have not yet appeared wrong. But over time, that supposed safety begins to transform into a heavy burden. I start to feel left behind by time. I feel stuck. And the most clarifying insight of all is that I have been treating the very first step as though it were a lifelong, irreversible decision, when in reality, it is only the first step. I have placed an excessive load on something that should be light. I want everything to be clear and certain before I take any movement, yet life rarely waits for that level of clarity. And perhaps what has kept me standing still for so long is not a lack of readiness, but an overly rigid definition of what being ready must look like. I haven't fully resolved this within myself yet, but at least now I can see it plainly. The problem doesn't lie in the plans. The problem lies in the meaning I have assigned to taking the very first step. The change itself was not dramatic in any way. There was no grand moment, no sudden surge of motivation. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I sat down, opened my laptop, and simply felt exhausted by my own mind. I was tired of overthinking, tired of postponing, tired of telling myself I'll be ready soon, while never actually reaching that point. In that moment, a very simple realization emerged. All this time, I had been asking myself the same heavy question: is this the right step? That question carried too much weight, so I replaced it with a different one. I began asking only this: can I take this step right now without wanting to run away from it? It sounds trivial, yet the effect was entirely different. I stopped thinking about the outcome. I stopped projecting into the future. I focused solely on one small action I could perform, even if the result turned out imperfect, even if it looked unpolished. To be honest, that first step was not impressive at all. There was no wave of pride, there was no triumphant feeling of finally. But there was one sensation I experienced, something entirely new for me. My mind felt slightly lighter. For the first time, I was no longer arguing with myself. I was no longer trying to prove anything. I simply moved, slowly, without making any promises. To others, it probably appeared insignificant, but for me, it marked the first time I stopped waiting for a future version of myself that was ready. I began with the version that already existed, the version that still hesitated, the version that still made mistakes. And only then did I truly understand. What keeps us stuck in place for so long is rarely a lack of readiness to move forward. More often, it is the persistent wait for a feeling of certainty that, in reality, never arrives. I do not know where this path will ultimately lead. I cannot yet claim that I have fully resolved everything within myself. What I do know with quiet certainty is this: for far too long, I waited for myself to become the idealized version that existed only in my mind. And perhaps that version was never meant to truly exist. What remains is simply the self that is here now, with all its doubts,
with all its small, uncertain steps. For the moment, that may be sufficient to allow movement to begin. If you find yourself in a similar place, perhaps there is no need to rush toward drastic transformation. Perhaps what is required is only this: to cease waiting and to begin from the version of yourself that exists today.